As you see here, there are a boatload of plants that have been neglected for a very long time, but never fear, we're gonna be taking care of that in this video. It's all about Leca, it's all about orchid bark, and how can we maintain a lot of these epiphytic and semi-epiphytic plants using no soil. Let's go. What's going on, my plant peoples? I am the ADHD gardener, where I use gardening, houseplants, and humor as a form of mental health therapy. This video may be a little long because I'm going to be hitting a lot of topics when it comes to houseplants, from semi-epiphytic to epiphytic plants, and using Leca and orchid bark for all of them. So you may have to skip around based on what kind of plant or plant needs you're going to want to find out. I have to do a lot of maintenance. A lot of my plants have been neglected because, again, that's always my problem. My problem is I don't pay attention enough, I don't observe enough, and a lot of my plants go by the wayside and a lot of them get neglected. And I can't have that if I'm gonna be trying to get better and better at what I'm doing. And that involves really tackling my plants. I know I'm probably not the best person, but guess what? This is real life. And there are a lot of people out here that are going through the same thing that I'm going through. But I have no problem showing you guys because this is a learning experience for both of us, right? Putting myself out here in all the glory for your benefit. Hello, Ramen. You cannot. I can't have you hovering over here. This is Ramen. Have you seen him? He's been in a lot of my videos. And he just covered me in fur. Hydroponics and semi-hydroponics 101. Hydroponics means obviously no soil at all, just plain water. The plant roots sit in the water all together. When I mean by semi-hydro, that means that we're going to be filling it up with water, but they will eventually evaporate or go down the water level. And that means that most of the time the plant roots will be dry. And that's what I mean by semi-hydro. So you are wetting up the roots, but they're not going to be staying in the water the entire time. A lot of my house plants that I have been neglecting are the epiphytic and the semi-epiphytic plants. Now you're probably asking yourself, what in the world is an epiphyte? The epiphytes are plants that are basically kind of like parasites. They do not involve any soil, and they actually grow off of another existing plant, like a tree or something like that. So they don't require any soil at all. A perfect example of that is, what do you call these? Oh my God, my brain fart right now. Air plants. There we go. Woo, air plants. I do have a lot of energy, you guys, because hello, I'm stressed out. And when I'm stressed out, I have a lot of energy. So, sorry, not sorry. These are epiphytes. Now, epiphytes are plants that grow off of another plant, not exactly in the soil at all. They don't require any. Look at them. This one doesn't even have any roots or anything like that. The plant is just as it is. Now, when it comes to semi-epiphytic, which means it can grow like an epiphyte, but it has to start off at a base of, like, the ground or soil or something like that. Another example of a semi-epiphyte, or has epiphytic ways, not necessarily a true epiphyte, but that would be like the philodendrons or other, mostly aroids. Now, if you ever never heard of aroids, aroids is a category or a whole genus, is that the right word? Either way, it's a whole huge category of plants that act like this. Last category is the succulents. Now, succulents and semi-hydro. Now, I've done a few videos on that with these snake plants, these very same ones. I'll drop a link down below so you can go check out all those videos on my house plants and trying out some Leca balls and semi-hydro. Another, look, maintenance people. A lot of these plant problems like dust and death and dying and yellowing, a lot of that can be a sign of what's going on in our mind. Maybe your plate is overworked or overloaded. So when we have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stress, that takes up a lot of space in our mind. And as a result of it, we're not paying attention, we're not being observant, we're not aware or mindful of our surroundings, and that's where the plants suffer. Now, when it comes to the grow medium for these semi-hydro is Leca balls and orchid bark. Those Leca clay balls, they're baked and then they're shaped up in these little balls, and that's what you would use as a growing medium for a lot of these plants. Well, that are grown in hydroponics or semi-hydroponics. Why would I say orchid bark? Because you would think orchid bark is just for orchids. Not necessarily at all. The orchid bark actually works for other epiphytic plants or semi-epiphytic plants. Remember, the orchid bark is basically a bunch of like tree bark that has just been broken off, and that's what you're using it for, your orchids or something like that. First things first, we're gonna clear this area and we're gonna talk about these snake plants. So let's get going because we got a lot to do and a lot of plants to get through. These are just an example of some of my snake plants that I put in Leca for a long time ago with those videos. I have neglected them, obviously, because they're looking a hot mess, but I have gotten some new growth. So that's telling me that this actually works for snake plants. Now, of course, I did a little cutting of a snake plant, and that one is doing pretty darn good. Ooh, it's a little dry, but it has roots on there and it's doing all right. Now, how did I get this going and how did I keep this alive? Basically, if you look at this one has water in it. I do not fill it up all the way. I only fill it up about halfway of this container. It is gonna be sitting in water, but what happens is after a while, through evaporation and basically the plant sucking up the water as it needs, it will dry up. And then there will be no water in this. And that's okay, because remember, succulents and cacti don't even like water like that. They hate it. So once this dries up, there is gonna be water still maintained in those Leca clay balls. So that's where they're gonna get their water from. So if I neglect this and I forget to put water in it, it's all good. But you will eventually see that you need to water it. Oh my gosh, my orchids. These were beautiful at one point in my life, but they are no longer pretty and thriving. Don't they look horrible? They look bad. Now, orchids are actual epiphytes. They literally always just do not require any soil at all. These will grow off of a tree. These are just like, or in the same category as epiphytes, or the air plants, I should say. Same category. There is a third option that you can use for orchids or, epiphytes or even semi-epiphytes, and that's moss. Sphagnum moss to be exact. The sphagnum moss will also help retain moisture levels on there too. So, that one could work also. This one was the best one that had the most growth. This one, of course, got really crappy because I left it in the sunlight. Orchids do not like direct sunlight, and this is the result of direct sunlight. See how bad these roots look? They look way too crunchy. This one has nothing. It's not even green. You want nice, green, healthy roots, and this is not it at all. So we're gonna be chopping off a lot of the dead roots, the dying roots. It just has to get fixed up. Now this one, looks like crap. This obviously looks like it's been shrunk up, shriveled up. That's from lack of water. So eventually they will get crispied up like here and they will die. All right, not cool. But I can save this because we still have lots of green on top. This is what the roots should look like. Nice and green, nice and thick, plump. Oh my God, that sounds bad. But either way, notice how this looks terrible. This is dead. Okay, so we would chop it off right here, cut the old and dead stuff off and let that go. Okay, so I have a scissor here and we're gonna cut off all the dead roots because, wow, I should probably not use these nursing snips. Either way, all the dead, all the dying has got to go. Don't worry, we're gonna fertilize it and we're gonna give it some extra help and it will grow back. It really will. This one is not bad. Next, rehydrate. All right, we rehydrated the little one and it doesn't need much. It does look shriveled up, but it's still green. So we're okay with that. We're just gonna cut off all the dead parts. So that's cool. This one seems to be the worst. All right, so there is still green growth on here, but there's a lot of death on here. So we're going to snip off a lot of that. Now that you've cut up and got rid of all the dead roots, any of the negative shit, we don't need none of that. Just like our lives. You don't want negative people in your life. You do not want negative energies in your life, man. You just don't want it because that is not going to help you grow into the person that you want to be. So cut that crap out just like we're cutting off those dead roots. What I have here is actually a combination of stuff. This is from the old stuff that I had the orchid bark in the first time. It's actually not that bad. I have some orchid bark in here, maybe a little bit of sphagnum moss, and definitely a lot of Leca balls. So that's exactly what I'm going to be using to put back in here. So if you wanted to use just Leca balls, not a problem. If you wanted to use just orchid bark, also not a problem at all. If you want to use just sphagnum moss, it would work, but you would have to let it dry out in between waterings, or maybe even just barely before it goes completely dry. Because, you know, but I mean, I don't think I would use sphagnum moss 100%. Now, when repotting it into a certain kind of pot, of course, yeah, this is an old yogurt pot, but I'm going to give you 3 options, all right? One of them is just putting it up in a container with no holes. Now, that's perfectly fine with the Leca and the orchid bark and all that, but you have to be very careful as to how much water you put in here. You can't just fill it all the way up onto the top. You'll drown your plant. Remember, these plants don't not like a lot of water at all. Don't require a lot of water. So you'd have to be very careful. I would only fill it up maybe to the bottom, just enough to get the roots wet, and then maybe even dump it, or just keep it in there. Just make sure it's not a lot of water. The second option is putting it into a pot that has drainage holes in it. It's kind of like called a cachet pot. This is a yogurt container, but it works, okay? So this is what I'm using, because this will be easier to drain out the excess water, okay? Because you can just take it out, dump it right here, and you're good to go. So that's what I'm going to be using here. The third option would be mounting your orchids or your epiphytes or even your semi-epiphytic plants, you know, your aroids and whatnot. You can actually mount this on a piece of wood, on a cedar board or something like that. You would use or cover the roots with a sphagnum moss and then mount them. This is about 70% Leca ball, 30% orchid bark. But if you wanted to do more of a 50-50, you can definitely do that option also. I have some large orchid bark. Now, ideally, I kind of did not want it to be this large, depending on the brand that you use. Maybe your orchid bark pieces will be a lot smaller, but that's all good, man. You know what I mean? It's all good. These are just basically like someone just took a tree bark and just shaved it all off. Not a problem. So I'm gonna be mixing this all up. You could do strictly orchid bark if you want to. Remember, it's all good. It's up to you, personal preference, or maybe the plant preference. Trial and error, baby. So I put some of this medium on the bottom. And now I'm just gonna fill it up on top and around. This is the only time that you'd be able to fill this up with water, because it can easily be taken out of the water and then dumped. Only way. If you're not going to be doing this cachet pot thing and you're going to be growing it just like this, then you got to be careful with your water content. I'm going to put it here. All right, so we're going to fill this up again. Okay, I ran out of Leca balls. No fear. Orchid bark is here. All right, you mix that up. Get everything wet. Get your balls nice and saturated. Oh man, I gotta stop. When will I grow up, Jack? When will I grow up? So there we go. That's it. Very simple. Now, when it comes to the care of the orchid, all right, no direct sunlight. None whatsoever. None. You want shade, indirect light, and then you're good to go. Remember, they do not need a lot of water, but you do have to water them. I would like to think you would water them as much as you would water your succulents and cacti. Once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, depending on your climate. If you're in a more dry environment, then you're gonna have to water more often. If you're in a more humid environment, you'd have to water less often because there's moisture in the air. So keep that in mind. And another way to tell if your orchid is really in need of water is look at the leaves. They look shrivelly. They look shrinked. They don't look the best. That is telling you that it needs water and it may need time to water. So this one is looking very, very crappy, okay? It's looking very shrivelly. It looks like it's been shrinking some, kind of like wrinkling up. That's how I know that it needs water. So what I will be doing with this one is I'm going to be soaking it for a longer period of time than the other ones. Remember, you still at the end have to empty out all that excess water if you're going to be doing this. But being that this needs some extra time to soak up some water, that's what I'm gonna do here. The next thing we're gonna do is talk about semi-epiphytes, or plants that are kind of like in the Aroid family that does not require a lot of soil to keep growing. Of course, maybe a little base to get it started, but once you get the plant started, it's not required to keep in soil. It really isn't. So what I have here is a Rapidora tetrasperma. Basically, it looks like a mini monstera, okay? It's not a mini monstera, but that's what they call it. All right, now this one is in 100% Leca balls. 100%. There is no cachet pot, so there's no escape for the water to go. Now, what you have here is a thing of beauty. I transplanted it out of a pot that was full with soil. I took out the soil, brushed up or like rinsed off on the roots, and then added it in here. I think I may have added some root hormone powder. That's not a problem. It's not going to hurt the plant. But as you see here, this is doing fantabulous. So all I do is just water. When I notice that the balls are looking dry, that sounds terribly funny. When your Leca clay looks all dried up, that's when I would tend to water it. Also, remember, look out for the yellowing of the leaves, because that is probably telling you that if you get new growth, it's taking up a lot of extra nitrogen, so we don't want that. Last but not least, we're gonna hit up the philodendrons, okay? Waste not, want not, okay? So if you can still use this grow medium that it came in, then you're gonna use it, okay? Especially if you don't have money like that. And Lord knows I don't have that money like that, because I'm spending all of my money on nursing. So I'm gonna use that again for a different plant, all right? What I should have done was touch the roots with a little bit of root hormone powder. But obviously, being that I've come this far, I can't go back without doing this all over again. So I'm just gonna leave it as is and hope for the best. I wanna say this is good. This has a high hope only because there's still a lot of green. So even if that one that looked like real crap, that one doesn't grow, it's okay, because the other one that is the really green one, that one will grow. So I'm gonna get something out of this. And check it out. Okay. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you got some good information out of it, because man, let me tell you, I hope you learned from my mistakes. And it's not that I'm trying to actively make these mistakes. It's just that, life happens, and I know I'm not the only one. And I know I'm not the only one that has, messed up or jacked up plants that they've been neglected or whatever it is, whatever the case may be. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you got some good information out of it. I know my plants are not picture perfect, but then again, how many people's plants are picture perfect? Not everyone is like that. And hey, if I gotta show my jacked up self for your benefit, then here I am. You'd be letting YouTube know that my plants and my videos are doing pretty darn good for you guys. And also, if you haven't already, then you can catch me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on there all the time. And last but not least, let us grow our happiness one plant at a time, one day at a time. Until the next episode, you guys, peace and love. Whoa, what a rare noodle sighting. Whoa, ramen noodles. Ramen noodles. Hey, what are you doing here?